Hello, my name is Sheena with Rise Wellness, and this is Activate Your Genius. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I am exploring my own interpretation of Richard Rudd's The Gene Keys, and today's passage is the 53rd Gene Key. This is the shadow of immaturity, this is the gift of expansion, and this is the Siddhi, or the highest destiny path of superabundance. So when we're talking about the 53rd shadow of immaturity, this gene is all about beginnings and the energy that we put forth when we start something new. A project, an endeavor, a relationship, a job, a relocation. What is the energy behind it? We really come from this reptilian survival brain that still has this base place of fear running rampant through our DNA. And as we evolve, that fear changes. And as we add awareness to that fear, we can start to adopt healthier new belief systems that cater to where we are now once we can recognize that there's no fight or flight. We don't need to turn that on. We can relax a little. So the contemplative question to think about in this gene is really, what is the true essence of your new beginnings? When you're getting ready to start something new, can you take the time to meditate with it? Can you take the time to think about the energy that you're putting forward into your new projects? Because if there is an underlying place of fear within that new project, well, I hate to tell you, but you're planting the seed that can lead to the demise of your dream. And I don't want that for you. So before you start something new, I just ask you or invite you to check it out. Notice the feelings that are coming up. Are they rooted in anticipation, excitement, just a creative force? Or is it coming from a place of lack, a place of scarcity, a place of fear? You know, as we talk about this gene and how it relates to our commerce world or business world, a lot of times we're seeing businesses that appear to be thriving because they're growing, but really what's happening is it's coming from a greed place. It's actually coming from a fear and lack place, that perpetual growth is not sustainable. It's actually damaging to the environment because a lot of these businesses try to grow so fast because this shadow, its programming partner is the 54th gene, and this shadow in the 54th gene is the shadow of greed. So you can see how the immaturity is looking for the greed. So this shadow passage is all about, is our attachment to things, or these new beginnings that we're starting, are they coming from the place of greed where we're trying to accumulate wealth? Now, Richard Rudd makes an interesting observation between the difference of greed and wealth, of wealth and prosperity. Wealth is really just the accumulation of money, right? And prosperity is really being in the flow of service, of your divine higher purpose, and accumulating the resources that will help you fulfill that destiny for you. So I hope you can see the difference there. One is just hoarding this accumulation of wealth because you're afraid of not having it. You're afraid of what that looks like for you. Whereas prosperity allows this flow, this alignment with your higher purpose to come forward, and that accumulation of resources really is just to get you to the next step. So when you think about prosperity, not only is this coming from an expansive place, a higher vibration, but it's coming from serving others, serving your fellow humankind with something that you can give back to the world, which is really what we're here for, right? We're all these creative forces that have something to offer the world. So I think that's important to think about when we are exploring this passage, because there's nothing wrong with abundance, right? It's at the forefront of our a lot of our spiritual paths, our mantras, our I am statements, our affirmations all are about looking for this abundance. There's nothing wrong with looking for abundance, but we have to get to the root of why are we looking for it? Is it to get to a place that we feel enough resources around us that we can dig into our healing journey? Because if we're still in the fight or flight mode, it's really difficult to settle in and take the time to heal. There's too much going on. There's too much that you have to make sure that you've got enough of your needs met. So abundance really does come from a raised vibration where you can now feel safe enough to collect the resources that will allow you to take the future steps. So a lot of the businesses right now that are operating are really coming from a place of fear. You know, slowly we're starting to see more businesses emerge that puts service before survival. I mean, think of Tesla. You know, he had this amazing invention of this free electricity. Can you imagine the service to the world if we had adopted that, if we had listened to that instead of going the Einstein route? So what we commonly see for growth in business is this expansion, but I invite you to recognize if this is the new growth, that the new endeavor that you're embarking on. Can you explore, is this business endeavor and this growth and expansion, is this coming from a thriving business that's inclined to take the next steps with it and everybody on that team is growing and evolving? Or is this saying, we've got to crank out more products, we don't have enough, you know, what's the basis of it? So that's really the contemplative question to kind of consider as we move through this passage. So what's really interesting about this fear place that is embedded in our DNA right now, it really has, it goes away from the prime law of abundance. As humans, we often have a hard time realizing how one we are with nature. And the universe always knows what to do to counteract, to remain harmonious, to do the balance. And we don't judge nature for the leaves dying and falling in the winter. We know that that's a natural part of the evolution of the cycle for nature to have this death that allows for the rebirth in the spring. So there's an interesting story about Yellowstone National Park where they went through this, someone had this great idea that they were going to get rid of the wolves at Yellowstone. And the idea behind this was if they get rid of one of the main predators, perhaps it will allow for further expansion. But what they didn't look at was how nature always has to compensate. If there's one missing, big changes are going to happen. So by removing the predator, what ended up happening is the wolves feed on the elk. So the elk became overpopulated. The elk became overpopulated that feed on the aspen trees. So now you have fewer trees, and you consider what this does to the riverbanks. Now this kind of erodes the riverbanks because there's fewer trees. There's fewer places for the birds to nest. So the birds aren't coming to Yellowstone anymore. The rivers are widening. You don't have the beavers coming to the rivers anymore. You even, because of the lack of shade that the trees were providing, now you have the temperature of the water has changed. The temperature of that river now means that there's different breeds of fish that are coming in. So all through the Yellowstone National Park, you got to see over a period of 70 years how by removing the wolves, you damage the entire ecosystem of Yellowstone that eventually they had to put the wolves back. So a lot of times we get in this place of forgetting that we are one with all of that. This is part of the same whole. And the immature place is when we forget that we make an impact. And it's not just making an impact on an individual basis, it's making an impact on a collective basis. And it might happen 70 years down the road. It might happen 700 years down the road. But those are things that we still have to consider. So the stress from this shadow really comes from the desire to be materially rich. So there's a big difference, like I said, between prosperity and wealth. Materially rich is something that's so glamorized in our society today. And I'm not going to say on the whole, because I know plenty of people that don't adopt that philosophy. But that's why this gene invites you to kind of sit down and think about your relationship to abundance or to material accumulation of products and services and wealth. So the real essence of this gene, as you are passing from the shadow state into the more gift state, it's inviting you to start to look inside. You know, we are living in the matrix, and what is that but this mental construct? You know, I know that's a really hard concept for some people to adopt, but we are creating through our awareness our life as we go. So instead of externally seeking, and this is the codon ring of seeking. So there is an element where seeking benefits us. It helps us in our evolution and our evolvement, but we'll see later down the road how that mindset does have to shift and change. But this passage from Immaturity allows us to seek inward. Instead of going externally for that validation, it wants us to tap inside and see all the resources that are within us. So we really have a hard time grasping the fact that we are a collective organism. We're deeply embedded in nature and Ruth. When one person can, nature and earth, I was like, what? When one person commits a selfish act, we have to look at how that unfolds throughout the collective. And, you know, we also have to note without judgment that we all bloom at our own times. So, you know, what one person might be immature at 16, somebody else might be immature at 66. You know, we all bloom and we all incarnate in our own ways, and we have to allow that to unfold as it will. So we have to really recognize through our maturity, through our path to maturity, that we are part of the whole. Everything that we do makes an impact. It makes an impact not just through our individualness, but through the totality, through the whole. So when we look at cause and effect, or the idea of karma, we have to recognize that it's not just on the individual level, but really it's in the collective force field. So, you know, if you've watched any of my other videos, you see a common connection and thread between the shadow frequencies. The shadow frequencies are always our victim mentality, and they're always rooted in fear. So this particular passage, the 53rd gene, this is our fear of our primal fear of our immortality, or our mortality, our death. So we want to keep believing that we're going to be reincarnated as a separate being throughout all these different lifetimes, rather than dissolving back into pure consciousness. Our ego has a really hard time adopting the idea that we will not exist as some sort of form. So we have this illusion that's been misrepresented from ancient Buddha wisdom and passed down, that our incarnations are these different individual beings coming back around. We can't be individual. We're not individual. We're fractals of the same one. We have to look at ourselves as fractals. And if we adopt that principle that we're fractals, well, then we have to come to the realization that how would we incarnate separately if we were never separate to begin with? So it's really ironic the way that as human beings, we want to be so tied to our individuality. But really, we're all a collective frequency. So there is no individuality. You know, it's one of those, this gene is so full of paradox. All of these genes are so full of paradox, but the individuality is the knowing embedded in our DNA that we're all here to serve some unique part. We're all projecting something. We're putting something out into ethers that wouldn't be there before us. So we all do have some sort of mission, but really, you know, again, thinking about the connections between all of the shadow states and all of the gift states. When we go through all of the gift and Siddhi states, these are all coming from a place of love. So what is the service rooted in love that you're here to give back? And that's how we really kind of form this individuality that sort of sustains us through this really complicated process of being part of something greater than us. So the original I Ching name for the 53rd hexagram is development. So I think it's also important to recognize that within these shadow states, they're not all bad. There is a reason that we have to develop. That doesn't come from something bad or wrong. It's just part of our growth. If we don't recognize our limitations, how can we evolve past them? So the limitation in this shadow frequency is really our self-obsession. You know, so much of our identity is such a major part of our lives, our individuality. So our self-obsession has to kind of be relinquished in this passage, because we have to really adopt the philosophy that we're part of this greater whole. So it's really funny, you know, we have this movie, I just saw the new one of The Matrix. So if anybody's seen The Matrix, this is a movie where the protagonist learns that he's living in a mental projection, a construct. So we also live in this world, but in this world, there's still so many shadow states within all of us that are collected or that are reflected out in the collective. So I know that there are people that will get really upset at the idea of considering our world as a social construct or mental construct, because if that were so, why would there be so much, you know, starvation and children suffering and all of the chaos, all of the destruction? It feels very, very real. But as we come through the passage in all of these genes, we have to recognize it all starts here. The more that we fix the chaos within our DNA inside our world, the more it becomes reflected outward. So, you know, this gene invites you, this passage into the gift state really invites you to explore the world as a dance, a playground, a game. You know, if you can allow that reframe, can you maybe relinquish some of the ties that you have on, I have to be this, I have to do this, things have to look a certain way, I have to keep up with the Joneses, X, Y, and Z, you know, because that's really coming from your shadow state. That's coming from a fear-based mindset. So, you know, as I kind of touched on before, Richard Rudd talks about our evolution, our maturity in terms of flowers. You know, we don't judge the bluebonnets in Texas for blooming before all of the other flowers. We don't judge the sunflowers for coming later in the season. So why would we judge humans on their incarnated states, on their level of consciousness, on their maturity that we see? You know, it just doesn't serve anyone to offer those kinds of judgments. So that's one of the biggest takeaways in this gene, is by getting rid of that self-obsession, then we stop projecting it onto others. And when we relinquish that, then we stop judging everyone. We stop casting our opinions on everyone, that things have to play out a certain way, or the way that you did things has to be the way that other people do things. We all grow in our own time, in our own way. We all evolve. And some people that might have had a really difficult childhood might be more mature at age 16 than someone is at 35 that had a different development. It doesn't make one right or wrong. You just have to realize how it's oftentimes our suffering and it's our traumas that lead us to the gift states, maybe even quicker, you know, because you also have to look at the incarnated states and where we're meeting people. We see these different students in their earth schools. We look at them as individuals coming to this earth school to pick up these new things, but we don't know how many times they've come back around, you know? It's all these different interesting concepts to play with. So the Buddha will say that we're constantly passing away and being born again. You know, we're constantly reincarnating. Like a snake is constantly shedding its skin. So are we, you know, metaphorically speaking. So, you know, as we realize that fear is the underlying aspect of this shadow, we have to note that this fear place is in our non-existence. Can we sit with the idea of going back to pure consciousness, not attaching to a form and being okay with that? And if we can't, can we explore that? Can we take the time to see how that comes up in our body, what our thoughts are to that, and kind of maybe reframe some of the old limiting beliefs? What happens when you go through this passage? What happens when you start attaching to these ideas, to this form? That's when your heart starts to open, you know? And like I said before, love is at the heart of all of these higher vibrations. So when we come out of our logical, intellectual mind and we start navigating life with our heart, that's when radical things start to happen. We start to realize that we can just kind of trust the process, surrender to the journey, and just have faith that it will work out. It always does. Nature always works out. So the repressed nature of this shadow is someone who is solemn. And what we really mean in this categorization of solemn are, these are the people who are afraid to make changes in their life. They are deeply rooted in fear. They're afraid of new beginnings. They want to control their environment. So oftentimes they'll get stuck or fixated on one thing, and they'll do one thing for the rest of their life. And this is their way of maintaining control. So these people are tending to live a pretty sorrow-filled life because we're expansive beings. We're all about growth and evolution. It really takes a lot of our energy to stop that process and get stuck and fixated on one thing. Now, on the flip side, the dilemma of this shadow, as seen in a collective force field or reactive state, is our restlessness. So the reactive nature of these people are shadow, from the shadow frequency is fickle. These people are fickle. These are people that are constantly starting things new, and they never finish anything. They never slow down enough to evolve. They're jumping from new task to new task to new task. And really what this is a distraction tool, a way of not going inwards. So I was recently on a podcast and I was talking about my mental health journey and how it kind of coincides with my sobriety journey. And what I recognized in my connection with alcohol or substance, it was really more of a codependent thing, was I was constantly looking for external validation. And when I gave that up and I addressed those things and I went within, I realized there was a little child in here suffering that I had built all these cages around, and my immature place wanted to move here, adopt these new friendships here, keep a busy calendar there, distraction, starting new, fickle, because I didn't want to slow down and take the time to deal with the problems that were in here. And what a game changer to go back in, heal all those wounded parts of my being, and in doing so, now project onto the world the love that I feel in here. So when you see people that are living these really fickle lives, you know, this is really coming from a shadow place of fear. So it might seem really exciting, but it might not really be very fulfilling. So the 53rd gift of expansion is really the driving force in our evolution. This is life evolving, expanding as life does, life on life's terms. Life itself really only knows expansion. So even when it contracts, when you think about it, it's really only expanding inward. It's expanding in a different direction, just like we do. Instead of seeking, eventually we come to a place of stillness, quieting down, of expanding within. So expansion's always going to happen, but we don't always know what that's going to look like. True expansion always involves evolution. So when we think of people who are constantly evolving, these are the people whose endeavors they keep outgrowing and they keep expanding, and that might be in business and their personal relationships. These are people that are honestly thriving because they're not doing it in one singular direction. Everything about them is expanding and evolving, and so you see it happening in all areas of their life. This is the universal law of cause and effect in action. It's a major theme of this gene. And when you grow or expand too much or too fast in a single direction, that's when you have to realize that you're moving from your shadow frequency, because you're trying to attach to something and attach to it quickly. True expansion is an overall evolution that's going to go out in every direction. So true growth in business only happens when all of the consciousness within that business is expanding, growing, and developing as a team, as a unit. So evolution demands that we become more simple. You know, when you meet people that are wealthy and famous and have accumulated all of this material stuff, you start to recognize that many of them come to the process of wanting to get rid of it all. And sometimes you see someone that wins the lottery and then a few years later, they're dead ass broke. You know, they went through this full expansion so fast, so rapidly, that the law of universe had to go to the opposite place of contraction. So, you know, even though we might not understand it intellectually, as we get more complex, our systems really become simplified. And it leads to greater efficiency. This efficiency internally really leads to a place of seeking, to a place of surrender, of stillness, of slowing down so that your awareness can grasp the complexities of all these systems while you just simply trust the process. It's going to work out. Our evolution is always based on expansion, inwards and outwards. So the shadow frequency is wanting to expand without wanting to grow and evolve. So, you know, it's coming from a place of greed. There's a quote that Richard Rudd says. It says, "Expansion happens when consciousness is permitted to penetrate form in greater depth." It's about penetration. The more you expand, the looser the form becomes, so that you begin to glimpse the consciousness hovering behind it. Of course, the ultimate expansion is the expansion of human awareness itself, which underlines all other forms of expansion. So last week we talked about penetration coming from a shadow place and the 59th gene. And these are the people that want to penetrate someone's aura. Let me get in. Let me crash down your walls. Make me a part of your connection, of your intimacy. So this penetration in this gene is still about breaking down these walls, but it's also coming from a place of non-attachment, of growth and expansion. These shadows are necessary for our evolution. We don't want to kill off our ego. We just want to add more awareness to it. How are we operating? Why are we thinking those things? Are those things resonating from a place of fear or a place of love? That's always the question. So the expansion of frequency can only happen through the heart. As you allow your awareness to expand, it opens your heart. And from the gift level, you start to recognize that everything has a life journey, a birth, a life, the appearance of a death. So consciousness is no different in our human body than it is in a tree. We all experience this cycle. And death is not even a contraction from this awareness, but rather an expansion that's pulled inwards. So the 53rd gift invites us to just be awestruck and wondrous about life. Life is magic, and as we add this awareness to it and we watch it unfold, we see the cause and effect, we see our role in the collective. It invites us to move through life, you know, a little bit more gracefully, having a little bit more empathy for ourselves, you know, in letting go of who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do, and we're letting our heart guide us. This shift puts you into the flow, and when you get into the flow, life becomes so much simpler. So the vision that I keep having, that I'm even kind of expressing with my hands a little bit, the vision that I keep having around this passage is just this vision of like a pulsing heartbeat, this ebb and flow, this expansion and this contraction. You know, I don't judge it. I see the things come. I see them go. I let them come. I let them go. I don't have an attachment to them. I just let them be. And as I do, it just feels like a heartbeat. It feels like a breath. This there's no ties to it. And I don't know, I simply keep getting this vision that I can't fully capture in language, but I hope that kind of seeing this is kind of, what keeps happening in my brain, honestly. What I keep seeing is just this force, this coming and going. So when we think about maturity, we think about old people, right? Old people are slow. They slow down. They have more wisdom. They attain that wisdom through experience, So this gift of maturity, this gift of expansion it comes with us without effort. It comes to us in the times that we practice the pause, that we slow down and take deep breaths. We go into prayer mode. We go into meditation. We go into contemplation. We breathe deeper. We take these fuller, deeper belly breaths. Expansion emerges naturally without any effort. It brings us to a place of calm, and we like that calm more than we like that excitement. And this is part of the maturity as we evolve through the ages. Maturity brings more simplicity than complexity. We stop attaching to outcomes, to people, to places, to things. This perspective brings about more peace than ambition. And all of this comes from our slowing down place. So, the past few years I've been doing a water fast, a 7-day water fast. And what I love about the water fast is there's so many gifts that I get from it. But one of them is the conservation of the energy allows my rhythm to slow down. When a rhythm slows down, but my awareness quickens, my intelligence heightens, I listen much more than I speak as part of my conservation of this energy. I move through life slower, but I'm not missing anything. I'm still acutely aware of what's happening. Life becomes more expansive. It becomes more efficient. It becomes more simplified, more effective. So sometimes expansion happens over a period of lifetimes. And, like we said before, not all expansion is good. We have to recognize that some expansion comes from an imbalance, a place where we're coming from immaturity and we're trying to accumulate something from a lack or scarcity place. So this gift really invites us to explore in meditation, what is our relationship to suffering? How do we deal with suffering? Do we use it as fuel for our expansion? Or does suffering suffocate us? Does it trap us? Does it lead us to a solemn life? We're afraid of new beginnings. We're afraid of change. We try to control the environment. I find that in my life, it's not always been this way, but I love to use suffering as a tool to fuel my development, fuel my expansion. I don't suffer to the depths anymore because there's always a teaching in it. There's a tool behind it. There's a reason why something didn't go the way I wanted it to go. So the 54th gift of aspiration blossoms as the programming partner. And like I said earlier, these are the driving forces to our evolution. This aspiration combined with this maturity, this expansion, it leads to more awareness. It leads to more love. It leads to more creativity. This creativity leads to more harmony. And as this goes out into our collective, this is the world that we create around us. So the 53rd gene, this is the Siddhi of superabundance. And what's funny about this, and Richard Rudd has such a love of poetry and a love of words. And I think by sharing that, I love this book so much because I love the way he breaks down language. So when we look at superabundance, if we take the prefix of super and look at that from a Latin derivative, that means above or beyond. So superabundance then implies beyond abundance. And that's really what we come to find out with this gene. Superabundance is beyond abundance. The Siddhi gives rise to one of the greatest misunderstandings that we've ever had, and that is, in the history of spirituality, our concepts around rebirth and karma. So it's a widely held belief that our soul is born, it goes through this life, and then it dies, and then it's reborn into another body over and over and over and over and over again. But if we go back to the original words of Buddha, there is no self. So if there's no self, that means that there's no soul to be reborn. So then what reincarnates is the karma of our actions. So the greatest truth of life means that it consists of limitless beginnings, but no endings. And that's really the meaning of superabundance. Life is going to go on creating new forms whose actions are going to determine the destiny of these new forms, this karma. You know, nature is going to be the effect of this karma that we breathe into this life. The only continuity between the forms is the genetic mechanism that creates them. It's the consciousness. It's the consciousness endlessly penetrating the collective and evolving based on the collection of all of our actions. So that means that material abundance is not a part of this Siddhi. So what's interesting is the material accumulation of goods is in the gift state of this gene. It's not in the highest expression. The highest destiny path of this gene is beyond all of the material gains, because it's beyond the self-obsession. It's interesting. So your identity with your body, with your destiny, with your higher purpose, it has to completely dissolve as your identity around self dissolves. So really, superabundance, then, the paradox of this, which we see so much in all of these genes, is that superabundance is really this vast emptiness. I can nerd out on this idea so much. I think it's so incredible to think that we're entering this new evolutionary phase in our human awareness where we're taking these quantum leaps in consciousness. This is one of the things I'm most excited about with this year. And, you know, last year I mentioned in one of my other videos that I got sober from alcohol. And my relationship to alcohol might not look the same as other people's, but really what it is as I deepened into my spirituality and I gained this new awareness, I wanted to keep my vibration in this raised frequency. And I have realized in my sobriety how many people are going through this same process, whether they're giving up their addiction to alcohol or substance or shopping or relationships or just going and doing the inner work. You know, we are coming to this place that everyone is stopping to do this work. And it's so important, and we see it. We see how it's manifesting in this superabundance with, just this new mindset, this new place of love, this new consciousness, this new connectedness, togetherness. I don't know, it's really special. I think we're just like kind of at the cusp of it, seeing it. I think we're just going to keep seeing more and more of it. So, you know, we have to really realize in the superabundance that we can't take another birth because we've never actually been born. You know, we just are, you know, I am. That's it. That's all we are. I am. That's it. We just are. It takes a lot for our intellectual mind to try to wrap around. We just are. There's nothing left to do but just be. Just move from your highest place. Just love. Just have your heart open. Just trust. Just have faith. Just surrender. This final stage brings us from a place of seeking to a place of rest, of meditative tranquility. There's nothing but to do but to live. This final stage is the realization. It's enlightenment. It's the shocking leap into pure consciousness. It's the end of evolution itself. It's beyond evolution. It's super abundant. It's an eternal end without an end. We can't force maturity. There's no point in judging it. Relax. Everyone's going to have their own awakening, their own realizations at their own time. Their own incarnations are going to happen when they happen. We don't have to force it. We don't have to judge it. We don't have to express our beliefs and our opinions as a universal truth. I think it's so fun to see how these genes play out in my life. And so I'm going to be totally honest with you. Sometimes I have a method of madness for why I decide to go and dig into a certain gene to teach it. And this particular week, I just flipped open the book and it led me to the 53rd gene. And when I saw the Siddhi of Superabundance, even though I've studied all of these genes, I don't have them all memorized. So when I went back to really study this deeper to teach it, and I looked at Superabundance, my shadow frequency was like, hell yeah, I want to manifest superabundance. Let's dive in this week. Let's start this new month off with this one. So then I'm reading and I'm recognizing, oh shit, this is my low frequency. This is my lack scarcity mindset. This is a place of lack that's wanting me to channel and manifest the superabundance. So I had to sit with that. And what I did is I went back and thought about what my dreams are. And I thought about what is an accumulation of wealth for me. Is it coming from a greed place? Is it coming from a lack? Is it coming from a fear? Is it coming from just wanting to hoard this wealth? And I could sit with myself and honestly say that if I came into this material wealth, that I want to create these sacred places for others to come and heal. And I think that that's part of my devotional service to the world. And that's not a bad thing. This accumulation of abundance is coming from a good place. It's coming from a heart place. And as I navigated that and contemplated that, funny enough, my phone starts blowing up with all of these work opportunities to make this money effortlessly. These people have gotten my name from these referrals from other jobs that I've done, and my schedule quickly starts filling up. I'm so excited at this abundance that's coming my way. And then I have a friend reach out to me. The friend is having a hard time that day. And I start recognizing that last year when I had a hard day and I reached out to him, he literally stopped everything and came to meet me. And we just hung out in nature. We talked, we shared each other's energy. And I was able to get myself out of that victim mentality through that sacred connection with a close friend. And now as I realized, the tables have turned here and now he needs me. And I have this full plate, this full week of all these new abundant, prosperous opportunities. And wouldn't you know, we were able to chat that day and, get him into a better place. But one by one, all of these opportunities started rescheduling. Saying, you know what, I made a mistake with the date. You know what, my plans have changed. Are you available this day instead of this day? Can you do 2 sessions instead of 3 sessions? And little by little, this time and space started opening up later in the week that I could get together with my dear friend. Funny enough, we get together, we spend time in nature, and as we're sharing this sacred energy with one another, I'm realizing this is superabundance right here. This didn't cost a single dime. This was not coming from a fear place. This was coming to say that, superabundance in this way for me meant opening up the time to spend with a dear friend, to give back in a way that he gave back to me last year. And it goes beyond the abundance. I had this time, I had this expansiveness, and wouldn't you know, as the universe would have it, all of that money still came to me. Didn't miss a nickel of pay, even though I got this expansive time. So activating your genius, we talked about at the beginning, the contemplative thought around this gene is, what is the true essence of your beginning? Is it rooted in a place of fear? And if it is, before you embark on that new journey, that new project, that new task, can you sit with that? Can you reframe that? Can you offer something that takes the fear out of it so that you're left with this excitement, this anticipation, this evolution, this expansion, this creative force to get started on the right foot so that you're not going to reach this inevitable demise? In the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd talks about the concept of bhakti. And this is the Indian concept of devotional love and chants and energy. This is singing and chanting, expressing gratitude towards ancestors, towards nature, Mother Gaia. So, this, I recently went to a cacao ceremony with kirtan. This is another one of those devotional chants, these singings. So, that might be a great way to explore this passage this week, is allowing in some of those devotional energies, those sacred ceremonies. If you're coming to a place of stillness, what does that feel like for you? Is that new for you? The idea of going within, seeking inward, how does that feel for you? Can you do that? Are you a seeker? And are you able to pause that? And instead of seeking externally for this validation, can you go internally and focus on there? All these shadow frequencies are, where are you playing the victim? So can you identify where you're playing the victim in your life at this moment? It's likely to be playing a really active role in your life, because that's the hold these shadow frequencies have on us. And when we sit and we pause and we slow down, that's when we can realize that a lot of these limiting beliefs that are circulating through our brain, they're not even ours. It's something that's been passed down. Maybe it's something that we've been reading or seeing on television. We have to recognize that a lot of our collective frequencies out there are coming from a place of fear and scarcity. And when we can stop and meditate and recognize that, we can reframe it so that we can adopt new belief systems that work better for us. So I know that's a lot. I know it's especially a lot to intellectually wrap our minds around, but I guess this journey just really invites you to explore with it. Today I'm planting the seed. What do these things look like for you? Contemplation, meditation, slowing down. How does that feel in your body? Is there a resistance to it? Can you sit with that and explore that deeper and more? As always, I thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I appreciate you so much. I'm so happy to be alongside this journey with you. If you liked this journey, if you liked this video, please explore the other ones. You can follow my Activate Your Genius sequence on YouTube. You can like this video and follow me, subscribe to the channel. You can also check out my Instagram journey at Rise Wellness Coaching. Thank you so much for being here. I love you so much. I appreciate you. Namaste.